The game Monopoly has come to life at McDonald's. Win them a DLT, Coca-Cola, or $1 million.
McDonald's Monopoly, a corporate event that I can get behind. Further incentivize consumers to eat unhealthy food with the chance of winning more unhealthy food, or perhaps some electronics. We all know what you really wanted though, the big prizes. You or your family likely went to McDonald's a few extra times when the event was running. After all, that's why it existed, and statistically, it worked like a charm. You wasn't holding out hope for that extra McFlurry, but man did it taste good when you got it. No, you were hoping for those big cash prizes, maybe the expensive luxury cars. The grand prize was $1 million in cash. Imagine that. And realistically, somebody's got to win, just like the lottery, right? Wrong. What if I told you that for the first decade of the McDonald's monopoly, it was a total scam? You couldn't physically win. The odds were precisely 0%. The reason? A man by the name of Jerry, a McCriminal so to speak. This applies to the United States, but not to Canada, which also had a 0% chance to win, but for a very different reason which we'll get to in a little while. Jerry Jacobson, born 1943, lived an uneventful childhood in Ohio until he moved to Florida in his teenage years. He grew up wishing for excitement. He always thought he was destined for greater than his parents, a life with action and excitement, just like a police officer or perhaps a life in the military. Jerry was also unlucky, at least for now. He suffered from a foot condition which completely ruled him out from a career in the military. But as Jerry's old man used to say, son, when one door closes, another opens. And that door led to the Florida Police Department in 1976. Unfortunately, Jerry's luck didn't really improve. First he broke his wrist, then when recovering discovered he had a neurological disease that came with partial paralysis. The police force terminated his employment and he was left with a broken dream and nowhere to go. Luckily, his wife was on hand to help him get back to his feet. They decided on a fresh start in another state. Get away from that reminder of what you've lost, she'd tell him. They had a few options, but the one that made the most sense was Atlanta, Georgia. His wife had the option to join a law firm there and even get Jerry a job through a client called the Dittler Brothers. Why not, Jerry said. The Dittler Brothers was a company that would print out scratch tickets and stamps. Now, this is a little bit cliche, but they needed security, and so ex-cop Jerry was the perfect man for the job. Unfortunately, Jerry and his wife separated shortly after, leading to a divorce in 1983, just 2 years after their move to the big city. But Jerry was used to setbacks by this point, and at least this time, he still had a job that he loved and one that he was great at. You see, in the police force, he was a rookie in a force of veterans. At the printing facility, he was the ex-cop who was trusted beyond all others. He had the utmost respect. I can really climb the ladder here, he thought. And he was right. They recognised his almost military precision and serious care when it came to duties, and quickly gave him the most important job they had available. Head of security for the production line. This was at the time the company had just taken on their biggest contract in history, the McDonald's Monopoly event. This was an absolute huge deal for Jerry. The company was in charge of printing 500 million tickets, which left the production running 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for 3 months straight. Now for the majority of the tickets, they're unimportant, just a bunch of filler stuff. You've all participated, right? You buy certain items on the menu. Nowadays they have stickers attached to the packaging. You peel them off and you either win or you don't. The free stuff you win can be on the menu, or random prizes all the way up to a crisp $1 million. So why was Jerry's new job so important? Well, those $1 million tickets had to be printed somewhere, and on those printing machines were minimum wage employees. The question is, how could the Dittler brothers trust minimum wage employees to not steal the highest value stickers? The answer is they couldn't. So the room was sealed and security watched them like hawks. Jerry took the job so serious that he would follow employees to the bathroom and watch them conduct their business. He checked their shoes before they could leave their warehouse, and he would have done more, but he wasn't allowed. When big tickets were to be printed, Jerry would be present. He then placed them in an envelope that had a special anti-tamper seal attached, and then with another security member, escort them to a vault, which they would then securely lock away until they were ready to be transported to the specific McDonald's store that would be the one to hand out to the lucky winner. As a refresher, this is how the whole chain of responsibility goes. McDonald's originally contracted a third party to handle the logistics of the event. This third party was called Simon Marketing. They were the company that then put the Dittler brothers in charge of printing and storing the tickets. Dittler, of course, put Jerry in charge of moving the high-value tickets to the vault when they were printed. Now, the next step of the process is the most pivotal and the one that is the most difficult logistically to solve. How do you safely transport the winning tickets to each individual McDonald's store, which then would hand them out to the lucky winner? Courier services were completely out of the question because they couldn't be trusted. This is when Simon Marketing offered Jerry the opportunity of a lifetime. The diligence to the security of the operation is exactly what landed him this job. They wanted to pay him all expenses in a hefty sum of cash to fly each individual winning ticket across the United States to whichever McDonald's would then have the winning ticket. Every flight would be first class, every hotel stay would be luxury. Now imagine his face when he heard this offer. He would be sipping expensive champagne, whiskey, bragging to air hostesses about his days on the force, and showing off his expensive new lifestyle. Unfortunately, that wasn't enough for Jerry. He was quickly accustomed to the high life and needed more excitement, which is why in 1989 he decided to steal one of the tickets that he was transporting, a $25,000 win which he gave to his stepbrother. I just want to see if I can get away with it. One hell of a story to tell people one day, right? Jerry joked as he handed it over. But just like that first hit of heroin, that's how it all starts. When weeks passed by and no one noticed the ticket was missing, that's when Jerry decided life had given him lemons and it was time to squeeze some of that sweet, sweet lemonade. Let's imagine you're Jerry. You've got tickets that are worth money and you know they're not being tracked. The only issue is, how do you redeem them? You can't do it yourself, you can't even use your family or close friends. That would be way too obvious. Instead, you need to find people to sell to. Now, Jerry's first client was his local butcher, a $10,000 ticket for just $2,000, a money duplication hack, but in real life. It worked flawlessly. Now this is the part of the story you're probably not going to believe, but it's completely true. Shortly after Jerry's butcher claimed this ticket, a totally unrelated McDonald's employee got caught stealing 3,000 Monopoly tickets. This was unacceptable to McDonald's, who forced a change in production and transportation. It also meant that any tickets Jerry had stolen to this point were unlikely to ever be traced, so long as no one snitched. He could walk away now with his winnings, with his reputation, and his job intact. Which is exactly what he did. Not by choice, of course, but because the protocols had changed. McDonald's now forced the tickets to be secured in sealed rolls with anti-tamper seals, preventing the theft of individual tickets. It was too risky, people would have noticed. Which left Jerry back to his mundane life. No more jet-setting around the country, no more luxury hotels, and no more thousands of dollars of theft. That is until 1995, when McDonald's decided to change the security system again, this time changing to the method they still use today in 2022, attaching the tickets to drink cups. To determine where the cups would be sent, McDonald's tasked Simon Marketing again to develop a software that randomly selected winning stores. What McDonald's didn't know is that whoever at Simon Marketing was calling the shots overruled their wishes completely. They never explained to Jerry exactly why, but he watched them do the random generation thousands of times, and if it ever selected a Canadian McDonald's, they just re-rolled the software. They absolutely refused to let anyone in Canada win a penny. Now Jerry wasn't an idiot. He knew that this was wrong. He also knew he could use this in the future if he needed to. McDonald's were advertising these prizes in Canada, reaping the rewards of millions of Canadian citizens buying extra food every time the event ran. They were doing this while never knowing what they were buying was a lie. They could never ever win. Jerry recognised this, and he saw a get out of jail free card if he ever got caught for his previous theft. Previous because he of course couldn't steal anymore. The anti-theft seals made it completely impossible. Until, of course, the company in Hong Kong that made the seals sent a package of them to Jerry by mistake. If Jerry had bad luck earlier in life, it was surely making it up to him now. Not only was he back in the game transporting the tickets, but the tamper-proof was trusted so much and the McDonald's employees so little that no one was checking if the winning tickets arrived at the individual stores, as that would involve employees being able to steal them instead. They just assumed if it arrived, that was the winning ticket. Which meant the only point of failure for Jerry's criminal endeavour was Jerry himself. If he could prevent the cashing out of tickets being tracked back to him, he was essentially a ghost. The first ticket he stole was the jackpot $1 million, which he knew was wrong and of course did make him feel guilty, which is why this first ticket was sent as an anonymous donation to a children's hospital. It's easy to imagine Jerry thought he was a real modern day Robin Hood at this point. Shortly after though, he went back to doing it for profit, which involved Jerry's butcher yet again. Knowing it was all legit, he wanted the big bucks this time, and Jerry offered him a $200,000 ticket with the agreement he'd be paid back $45,000 on the kickback. Cash this out using a relative, don't do it yourself. You already cashed that $10,000, if you cash another, people will know something's going on, and do it out of state just in case, he told him while handing it over. The butcher devised a plan. He said he'd give it to his sister and send her on a little bit of a road trip. Jerry thought everything went according to plan. 200,000 big ones, but unfortunately it came with a lesson learned. See, the butcher was also smart. When Jerry asked for his $45,000 cut, the butcher just laughed in his face. What are you gonna do? Report me to the police, he said. And he was right. Jerry couldn't do anything. He felt disappointed, but that soon turned to anger. See, when someone won a big prize, McDonald's capitalised on it. They asked if winners would join into a commercial for the Monopoly event, further pushing the narrative that you, an average Joe, could win big and change your life by eating a Big Mac. Imagine Jerry's face when he saw the butcher come on television in an ad. He almost lost his mind. Are you fucking crazy? He yelled down the phone at the butcher. Someone's gonna figure this out, and I'm gonna go to jail over this. But nobody was watching. Nobody noticed. Nobody cared about the statistical improbability of a butcher winning 10 grand and then 200 grand shortly after. I mean, the only people that could even check since the first one wasn't public were McDonald's or Simon Marketing. If McDonald's were paying attention, they'd have noticed that Canadians had never won anything, which was much more obvious, and yet nobody noticed. And it wasn't Simon Marketing's money, so they didn't care. This betrayal, however, taught Jerry a lesson and left him with a dilemma. How exactly was he going to distribute these tickets from now on? How would he make sure the person buying them would also take the criminal activity seriously? And how would he make sure he got paid? What he needed was a criminal who had access to a network of people and the bankroll to pay before cashing the tickets. Jerry's luck took care of this issue in 1995 at the Atlanta airport when he bumped into a man named Gennaro Colombo, one of the Colombo crime family. Yes, our man Jerry ran into an up-and-coming mobster from Brooklyn. Gennaro Colombo was the perfect partner in crime to get associated with. A man who committed crime for a living, had access to a massive criminal network and millions of dollars in capital. The Colombo family operated clubs, underground casinos, sports betting rings. They're involved in drug trafficking, labour rackets and other illegal operations. They got to talking, and by November of 1995, Gennaro wanted to know if Jerry was legit, so Jerry handed over a ticket for a Dodge Viper to prove everything was above board. Now again, imagine Jerry's face. This was like something out of a nightmare. Instead of keeping a low profile, Gennaro, a known made man, participated in the McDonald's commercial. Jerry of course knew better this time than to call the mobster and shout at him, but he knew this was a big mistake. Gennaro, on the other hand, was an arrogant, vain man. He watched too many mob movies, dressed identically, and couldn't speak a sentence without profanity. I want them to fucking see me taking their money. I want them to know it was me who fucked them, he told Jerry, while wearing his customary double-breasted suit and speaking completely with his hands. Shortly after this, Gennaro brought Jerry into the family, introducing him to his wife Robin. If there was ever a perfect couple, it was this one. She didn't just look the part of a crime family wife, she played it. The first time Jerry met her, she got out of the back of a limousine, flanked by two massive bodyguards, who were often seen walking her Rottweilers just behind her. This couple together was like the cover of a gangster movie, and Robin immediately took to Jerry, playfully referring to him as Uncle Jerry, while discussing how she would get a slice of the McDonald's pie fresh out of the oven. Robin was not a woman to waste time. The first ticket requested was the full $1 million, for which Jerry accepted a meager $50,000. Robin gave this ticket to her father, William Fisher, and then purchased another one to give to her brother-in-law. Before long, Jerry was being introduced to everybody, friends of the family, and over the next year he sold many, many tickets, both to the mob and friends of the mob. The Colombo family were using McDonald's money to build new criminal enterprises from which they would then go on to profit for many, many years. While all this was going on a corporate level, Simon Marketing was failing upwards. They were publicly seen to be successfully handling a massive undertaking with many moving parts with the McDonald's monopoly. This led to other contracts with large companies like Mars Incorporated, who decided to run a contest for M&Ms and tasked them, the most trusted in the business, to handle the logistics. The rules for this one were very simple. Buy M&Ms, eat M&Ms, and if you find a grey one, you win $1 million. But what Mars didn't know is all roads lead back to Jerry, who stole the grey M&M and stored it in Columbo's freezer, which almost ended in tragedy if it wasn't for Uncle Jerry being there. One night, Robin, while stoned, was looking for a snack and she very almost ate the single grey M&M. Luckily it wasn't there for very long, as Gary gave it to an associate in the Columbo family, and then of course the McDonald's operation continued as before. 3 more tickets, including a $1 million prize, were handed out to Jerry's stepbrother, but unlike everyone else, he didn't want the money. He actually put them in Salvation Army clothes, and would later say he just didn't need it. Fast forward to 1998, Jerry was kind of lost in the sauce at this point. I mean, his life was fantastic, he owned multiple properties, he had a lovely new wife, his social circle were powerful and rich, but he'd been around the mob for too long and started to think he was also a made man. He started dressing in sharp suits and using a new name, Geraldo Constantino. Yes, Jerry Jacobson was now Geraldo Constantino. He also joined a classic car club and of course used that as a new way to find contacts to sell more tickets. What's interesting is that Jerry was also playing a dangerous game. At one point he asked Robin, the wife of a mobster, to marry him while she confessed to be cheating on Gennaro. Their relationship was a little bit complex. See, the mob life was not for her and she wanted out, which on May 7th, 1998, her wish was granted, though not how she would have preferred. The family were involved in an accident on the highway where a truck hit the car, sending it flying. Robin and her son had superficial injuries. Gennaro, on the other hand, was unfortunately at death's door. He was unexpected to make any kind of recovery, and 2 weeks later in the hospital they made the decision to turn off his life support machine. This left Robin out of the mob life as she wanted, but also left Jerry without the connection to the Columbo family. If he wanted to continue the operation, he needed to find someone who could fill the massive hole in the operation that Gennaro left, which is when he met Don Hart. Don had absolutely no reason to trust Jerry, so he gave him $200,000 up front, which secured him some trust and connection to multiple new associates, through which he could start distributing tickets. One of which was Andrew Glum, a man who was convicted after transporting cocaine across the country, and then tried to dodge his sentence by fleeing to Europe on a 16-month vacation, only to be arrested upon his return. Jerry's new associates were definitely nowhere near as competent or trustworthy as the one he'd just lost, but he still had to get rid of the tickets somehow, and so Andrew was given a $1 million jackpot. This carried on for a little while until March of the year 2000. Everything had been going fine. Jerry had stolen to this stage well over $24 million of tickets over the last decade, and nobody had noticed a single penny missing. McDonald's seemingly ignored the entire thing, and Simon Marketing were way too busy seeing their success rise as a result of the campaign to take any kind of close look. This was of course until the inevitable happened. Now, the likelihood of a secret or crime being discovered grows exponentially for every additional person who knows about it. For Jerry, the number was now in the dozens with first-hand information. Those dozens likely told a handful of people each on average, and on it goes. The number of people who knew at least enough details to make life difficult for the operation were in the hundreds. Robin's father, William Fisher, and Robin's friend, Gloria Brown, have illegally won McDonald's Monopoly prizes, and Uncle Jerry is behind everything. This was the message that the FBI received on their anonymous tip line. Considering the term Uncle Jerry, and of course interviews with Robin many years later, it is believed that the Columbo family were the people who tipped off the FBI because they were upset that Robin no longer wanted to be involved with the family anymore after the death of her husband Gennaro. At this stage, Special Agent Richard Dent of the FBI made contact with a McDonald's representative called Amy Murray, aka McQueen, to inform her that the Monopoly game might be rigged and she should consider looking into it. McQueen then phoned the two people named in the tip, William Fisher and Gloria Brown. She discovered that the two who claimed the winnings in different states were currently living in Florida, which is a fairly big coincidence. Enough to at least call back Agent Dent, who began Operation Final Answer. The operation consisted of 25 agents across the United States and involved tracking over 20,000 phone numbers to record conversations surrounding the criminal enterprise Jerry was to this stage running for over a decade. Now, while the investigation was still finding its legs, Jerry met with an old friend called Dwight Baker, who was having some health issues. Jerry, being the good guy he was, offered the deal of a lifetime. I'll give you $1 million ticket, you get your foster son Chandler to cash it in out of state, and then you give me $100,000 back. A deal too good to be true, especially if you knew he's been doing this for so long and nobody's ever been caught. Unfortunately, that's not exactly how it went down. You see, when Chandler went to the McDonald's to turn in the ticket, he was confronted by TV crews, and the FBI were watching the whole time. Despite the size of the investigation, a year went by and Jerry was still up to tricks as of 2001. Unhealthy old friend Baker transferred some land to Jerry in exchange for a couple more winning tickets, one for $500,000 which he gave to his wife's sister, and one for $1 million which he gave to a friend called Ronnie Huey. At this point, McDonald's very own McQueen was now paying very close attention to each victor, passing along information of any suspicious activity to Special Agent Dent at the FBI. Huey was one such suspicious character for the reason that he refused to take part in the TV commercial, citing his recent depression and wanting to remain anonymous, which to be honest sounds perfectly reasonable, but when Dent looked into his details, noticed that Huey lied about his home address and claimed the ticket out of his home state and then immediately returned there. He actually lived just a few miles away from where the last $1 million prize was won. The next $500,000 that was to go to Baker's wife's sister would actually be claimed using great operational security. They did everything perfect. They rented an apartment out of state, obtained a phone line, a mailing address, a bank account, and even a driver's license for her before she claimed it. It was actually like she lived there. No one would ever be able to discover the scam, except for the fact that she bragged to all of her family members, and this information made its way back to the FBI, who discovered she lived just a couple miles south of the last two winners. With all of this information, the FBI was able to create a 25-mile golden triangle of suspicious activity for the McDonald's winners, and guess where the middle of the triangle pointed to? To Jerry. McDonald's at this point were very close to making the decision to cancel the whole game. They had no idea how far this thing went, how long it had been going on, but they now knew that all of the recent winners were the result of a thief. They were still of course profiting from the marketing it generated, and the FBI managed to convince them to continue just a little while longer so they could gather even more evidence. It was at this stage that Dent of the FBI pulled one of the oldest tricks in the book, and it worked like a charm. He placed a trap for the group. The checks for the last two winners were purposefully delayed. This sowed distrust among the group. Jerry, who was owed money and wasn't getting it, Baker, who thought his wife's sister had taken the money and was lying to the pair. The next step was for Simon Marketing to contact the woman, asking her to head to California to pick up the prize. Baker was so paranoid at this point that his wife's sister was stealing the money, he waited at the airport to confront what he thought was the thief. She touched down with $20,000 in cash and a check for the remaining $480,000. As the pair argued in the airport, the undercover FBI was recording everything. This was of course the fatal flaw in Jerry's operation. The casual incompetence of others would be what eventually led everything back to Jerry. After the confrontation in the airport, the FBI followed Baker for the next few days and watched him pull out $70,000 in cash, place it in a McDonald's paper bag, and drive to a town called Fair Play, ironically. This is where Baker exchanged the bag for another winning ticket from Jerry. During this interaction, the FBI learned that the next winner would be one of Huey's contacts that lived in Texas. A quick check on Huey's phone records led the FBI to a man named John Davis, who just so happened to claim a $1 million prize a few days later. This was enough to bring down the whole operation. The FBI had everything they needed. The end of a decade of McFraud. As of the 22nd of August 2001, 8 people were taken into custody. Jerry Jacobson, Dwight and Linda Baker, John Davis, Andrew Glum, Michael Hoover, Ronald Huey, and Brenda Fennis. Simon Marketing, of course, were some of the first people to discover the arrests due to the fact that Jerry was still working on transporting the tickets for them, and they were of course confused. How could the same security guard who checked other employees' shoes for stolen tickets be the one who was stealing from them for an entire decade? The biggest shock though was their stock price, which dropped from $3.05 each to 19 cents in a complete straight line down. So now you're gonna ask, what happened to Jerry? Well, remember that get out of jail free card? It worked. The charges filed against him would have had him die in jail. Instead, he got 37 months in prison, and they seized all of his assets in exchange for his testimony on Simon Marketing rigging the McDonald's monopoly to prevent Canadians from winning for over a decade. Simon Marketing lost their contract with McDonald's, who were completely outraged that this was going on under their noses. And then, poetically, Simon Marketing went out of business. McDonald's CEO Jack Greenberg decided to make it up to their customer base by creating a very special giveaway of $10 million in which a prize patrol would randomly walk up to customers in stores and just give them $1 million prize. Luckily, all roads did not lead back to Jerry on this one. As another show of good faith, McDonald's also allowed the children's hospital that received the first $1 million prize to keep it, since the money was spent on treatments for kids battling cancer and other terminal diseases. During the trial, more than 50 defendants were convicted of mail fraud and conspiracy. Some of them were sentenced to prison, others managed to overturn their cases on appeal because it was deemed they were being duped by Uncle Jerry. In the end, 60 winning tickets were stolen, totaling over $24 million in cash or assets. On the day of his trial, Jerry said, "This has been the biggest mistake of my life," and before leaving the courtroom, he shook hands with Special Agent Dent, the FBI agent who brought him to justice. Dent was, of course, who Jerry wanted to be earlier in life. He wanted to be an enforcer of the law, and instead, he was caught by one. Jerry Jacobson still lives in Georgia with his new wife, still paying off the court-ordered $12.5 million restitution. And that's the story. If you ever wondered why you never won the McDonald's monopoly, it's because it was never possible in the first place, all thanks to Jerry, the infamous McCriminal.